Welcome back to Worst Seats in the House. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta, coming to you live from Splitrocks on this beautiful Wednesday night here in the Twin Cities. And Anthony, we both just landed from Vegas, where the Wild forced a split, took home ice advantage back from the Vegas Golden Knights, at least for now, going into games 3 and 4, Thursday night and Saturday afternoon. And by the way, we will have, I believe, one live show in May. That'll be determined on where and when that will be. So pay attention to our social media and the podcasts and all that stuff. And man, the Wild got off. It's funny. I was on Barrero the other day, and I said I loved everything about their game one, but I felt like they were playing almost too safe. You know, and I think, I don't know if it's been a habit that they've gotten into the last 5 or 6 weeks because they had to, and that I would love to see them to just, come full throttle, take control of a game and take it to Vegas. And sure, they had to weather a little bit of a storm the first 4 minutes, but the Hartman line came out, played a real momentum churning shift, and then they did exactly what I was hoping, and that was take it to the Vegas Golden Knights the rest of that first period, score 3 goals, and go on to a 5-2 win.
Yeah, I thought their start was good in both games, and their start was probably better in game 1 than game 2.
Absolutely.
I thought Vegas started the second game, the first 4 or 5 minutes might have been that was the best that they had played at that point in the series. But I think Minnesota's they've been right there with them. They've been just as good as Vegas 5-on-5 in both games. And there was a good push by the Golden Knights late in game 2. I thought Minnesota got a little conservative at that point, protecting a lead, and Vegas started to push, but they withstood it. And they did exactly what you want to do as a road team, go in and get a split. And the old saying in hockey is always that you don't have a series until somebody loses at home. Well, now you got a series. Vegas has lost at home. And
to your point, they defended a lot in the last half of the game, only had 7 shots in the last 42 minutes. But Gustafsson, there was a big pocket there at the end of the second that he came up big, and then obviously in the third period as well. But for the most part, their top 3 lines, their top 2 defense pairs played as good as we've seen them play.
Their stars are better than Vegas' stars so far in the series.
No doubt about that.
Kaprizov and Boldy have been better than Stone and Eichel. Minnesota's top defensemen have been better than their top defensemen. I mean, Theodore and McNabb, which is one of the better shutdown tandems in the league, has been exposed. They were -4 and -3 last night. And Minnesota's top 4 have been terrific. And I thought coming into this series that Minnesota's stars had to match theirs, and the Wild, to win the series, would have to be better on special teams. And they haven't been better on special teams, but they've been such a small factor in this series with only 2 power plays for each team that hasn't been the case. I still think that will be as the series goes on.
Yeah.
And I think the Wild have to be better there. Gus has been better than Hill so far. I don't think he's had to be terrific, but I thought he was great in game 2. I thought he was good in game 1. One more save could have made the difference in that game. But I thought in game 2, when the Wild needed it, he came up with a couple of really sneaky good saves. There were 2 deflection saves that didn't just hit him. He actually reacted to the deflection and made both stops. And Vegas came close on a couple others. They had a couple right-off faceoffs where they got great looks where I don't even think Gus moved and the puck didn't miss by much.
Yeah.
But so there was some good fortune for Minnesota late in the game, but they got exactly what they deserved, which was a split in Vegas.
And to your point on the special teams, every series is unpredictable because it's different referees and linesmen every single game. And so, yeah, the first 2 games, we saw a lot of things not get called, but that could change at any given moment. And so, the Wild's special teams, they haven't had a lot of looks. They've only had 2 power plays, 0 shots on both of them. They only had 2 penalty kills. Both went in. One was an empty netter.
Yeah, and one of those was only about a minute because it was
5
late
seconds.
in the game, and one was 5 seconds long.
But at some point, that's going to become a factor. And to your point on the Eichel line, I mean, I'll be interested to see how they come out in game 3 because Bruce Cassidy started to give it to him after the game last night. We all know that how proud of players guys like Jack Eichel, Mark Stone, Ivan Barbashev are if that's continuing to be the line. And you just know on any given moment that they could absolutely change. And last time that Jack Eichel was at XL Energy Center, he left with a hat trick.
Well, he had a hat trick, but he wasn't playing against Eriksson Ek that night.
Right.
And that's the interesting part of this to me is that these were the two games where Cassidy had the opportunity to match. He stayed away from Eichel against Eriksson Ek almost exclusively throughout game one. Then in game two, he at different times went back to it and quickly went away from it. But now, if I'm John Hines, I'm going Ek against Eichel every single shift here at home. And Wild shut him down when they didn't have the right to match. Now they've got the right to match. You would think it would get even more difficult.
And how do you think that it would affect guys like Kaprizov and Boldy if they're maybe more on the defensive side of the puck?
I don't think they'll have to be on the I think they keep playing the way they're playing, and it's going to force Eichel's line to defend. And, I mean, you have to be prepared to defend because there are going to be some times they have the puck, for sure. But I think the best way to stop that line is to force them to defend. And you know, the first night, Cassidy went those guys against the Gaudreau line early, and then when Hines swapped Gaudreau and Hartman's spot, it seemed to disrupt them too. So if I'm Hines, I'm going to make sure it's a steady dose of Brodin and Faber, occasionally Middleton and Spurgeon, but I want Brodin and Faber and that Ek line against them as often as possible. Obviously, the score could change that strategy, but assuming that everything's tight as you go. You know, I want to go back to your point about the penalties, though. Every series takes on a personality. And if you remember the series in Dallas, I thought Pete DeBoer handled it brilliantly. He handled it in the media. He handled it with his team. He was even keel. Dean Evison was volatile. That bled over into the team. Foligno lost his mind in the series, and the Wild played that way. But DeBoer played it masterfully with just little subtle things that he kept saying. It was almost like a PR move that he was making from the beginning, saying, "Yep, those guys take a lot of penalties. We gotta produce on the power play. We just have to maintain our composure. Let them be who they are." Those kind of things. Yes, they're different officials, but the officials they're all hockey fans. They all see that stuff. They all read that stuff. They all see the stats. And in this case, it's like a Vegas PR machine where I don't think I've read a story coming out of Vegas for a month that didn't somehow refer to how disciplined they are. They don't take any penalties. They never take penalties. And in this series, there's probably been 8 or 10 that were blatant calls that were missed
100%.
that I believe is their reputation. The reputation is that, well, they just don't play that way, and therefore the calls were overlooked. And I think that's been the personality of the series. Now, to be fair, the Wild have had some penalties that didn't get called too, but I think that's why we were looking 2 games into this. We've had a grand total of 4 minor penalties, and Minnesota's spent 4 minutes on the power play and about 1:05 shorthanded. I don't know if it'll continue all series, but it sure feels that way because some of the things that Haig has gotten away with, the Dorofiev's slew foot on Eriksson Ek, those are penalties 99 times out of 100 all season long.
And it's always with the referee looking right at it. That's what's bizarre.
Right. And don't you think that part of Vegas's spin on all of this
100%,
is affecting that?
Well, I went to the Kelly McCrimmon presser the other day, and first thing that he pointed out was that they had an NHL record few shorthanded times this season, that they were shorthanded in NHL few. But then he pointed out, I don't understand how a 50-win team also gets no power plays. So I think what's hilarious, well, a couple things. Like, one, it is extraordinary that this is largely the same core that was in the Dallas series that was like Pete DeBoer wasn't wrong. That was an undisciplined hockey team all year long. And the one thing you could say about the big change that has happened to the Wild since John Hines has taken over is that has absolutely flipped on its head. The Wild were the 8th most disciplined team in the league this year. That's filtered right into the postseason. And what I find hilarious is that, you know, the campaign that Pete DeBoer was doing a couple of years ago, and what also made the Wild always go after the officials, which never is a good thing. They're doing the complete opposite their series, where they are pointing out constantly publicly how they believe this series has been officiated masterfully. And it's because they know that 5-on-5 best suits them. I think they feel they could play with Vegas 5-on-5, but I think they also know how poor their special teams have been this year. that it suits them to not be on the penalty kill and even the power play. I mean, you look at their 2 power plays this series, both those power plays really halted momentum.
Yeah, they did. Although if I'm the Wild, I wouldn't be going into this series saying I'm worried about the power play. I think Minnesota's power play matches up just fine with Vegas's kill. I know they're 0-for-2, but let's also remember these are Rossi and Buium's first 2 power plays in the NHL.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get 3 or 4 in a night where maybe you start to develop some flow and some rhythm, that might be a more fair judge of it. Their kill was better down the stretch, but Vegas's power play is dangerous. And so, yes, for that reason, you'd prefer to stay away from it. But let's also remember Vegas is one of the best 5-on-5 teams in the NHL because of how deep they are. I believe it's the top defensive core in the NHL, and their 4 forward lines all can score. We saw Cassidy just roll through those lines and really didn't seem to be too concerned about matchups in game 1. Little different in game 2 when he got behind, but I believe they're going into this thinking this is going to be a long series. This is going to be a long playoff run for us. We're not going anywhere if we're not using 6 defensemen and 12 forwards and using them all every night.
Just leaving the John Hines availability at the airport, it's very clear that they're looking to tweak the 3rd pair tomorrow night. You think Zeev gets a game off, or what do you think they're going to do? Because they haven't shown any inclination so far this season to sit Zach Bogosian, even though he might have that warranted.
I guess I'd be a little surprised if they didn't make some kind of a change on the 3rd pair. I don't know about the 4th line. I think that's an interesting dilemma because they need more from Marco Rossi. But Marco Rossi isn't going to bring more when he's playing with Trenton and Brazeau on the 4th line. He just isn't.
Right.
That's not where he's built to play.
I said that to somebody the other day. Like, at this point, it's like you might as well just use Evan Shore and not even play Rossi if he's going to play with those 2.
Except that if you make a change on the 3rd pair where, let's say, Buium's the odd man out, now Rossi's back on that top power play with your 5 forwards in all probability, and maybe at home.
I don't know if that's how they would do it. Don't you think they'd use JoJo? They're going to need somebody to get that puck up the ice.
I think
if you're going to go 5 forwards.
I think they'd go back to the 5 forwards they had before.
Which was Johansson, though.
No, it was Rossi. And when they went 6-on-5, remember, it was the 5 forwards plus Buium, and Rossi was on the ice for that.
It was their top power play, which was Buium, and Rossi was the extra guy.
But the 5 power play guy before that was Rossi. He's the guy who got bumped for Buium.
So who's getting the puck up ice? Just Kirill
It was Boldy a lot of the times,
yeah.
and Kirill was the trailer. But Boldy ends up being the high guy on that 5 forward power play. And maybe at home you can mix things up where Gaudreau could play with those 2 bigger wingers if you get to dictate the matchups. And look, this is not Rossi earned his spot to be on the 4th line, and part of it was I don't think he was great. Part of it was Ryan Hartman played terrific hockey, so he was better. He deserved to move up in the lineup and Rossi down. But I'm just saying, I don't think you're going to get much from Rossi in that role.
Right.
And then as far as the defensemen go, Hines has said all along he believes that if you're going to stick around in the playoffs for a while, you're going to see 7, 8, and maybe even 9 defensemen in a lot of cases. Now, the Wild don't have 9, but they do have 8. And, I think we'd probably see John Merrill in game 3.
Yeah, that's what I think as well. I just, with the whole Rossi situation, like, to me, he needs help, to your point. And I would make a change. Like, I think he needs somebody on his wing that has more pace and more skill to give him a better opportunity. 1, for John to roll 4 lines, but 2, for Rossi to function, to actually make an impact, because he's not your prototypical 4th line center. Like, he's just not gonna, he's just not gonna be able to do much in that situation. And so if you put in a Hinostroza or even a Liam Ogren or somebody that is going to defend well, because my biggest issue with them last night was it had nothing to do with the fact they weren't doing much offensively, is that they were a defensive liability. And you don't see if in the playoffs, your 4th line needs to be good defensively. And where they got into trouble in the second half of the game was that line twice getting hemmed into their own zone.
Yeah, that's true. I do like the size on that line, and I think when you're at home and can dictate the matchup better, that might be an easier way to protect them. But I mean, I certainly agree that I don't think you're going to get much from Rossi in that role. But I do think in game one, my takeaway when I walked out was that Marcus Foligno needs to be a more noticeable and bigger impact on this game, because in that game he was playing with Rossi and Nyquist, and that line was invisible. Even though Foligno had 11 hits, you walked away and I didn't remember that line ever having the puck. I went and looked at the stats afterward, and they had a 0.8 expected goals for percentage, like 0.8%. And I've never seen a line be that low. They didn't even register an expected goal for. They were underneath 0.01, and they were defending the whole night. So they had to make a change, and it paid dividends, because Foligno was probably, outside of Boldy and Kaprizov, was as noticeable as any wild forward in game two. So I don't know. I mean, one of the big challenges in playoff series that I always love is the coaches that make adjustments at the right time have success. And the hardest time to make an adjustment is coming off of a win.
Right.
And the great coaches still adjust. And when you think about it, you know that Vegas is going to adjust. Cassidy's going to come with something different in game three. And is Minnesota ready to counter that? I don't know. We'll have to find out. So I think that's one of those big challenges, is how do you look at it and say, yep, we won, but how can we be better? And I think one of the ways might be some mild lineup tweaks. And maybe it is just the third pair, and maybe it's something that you see during the game where a guy pops onto a different line for a shift here or there, but you keep it status quo, at least to start. That might be where Hines lands. It's just kind of a best guess feeling.
What do you think's going on in Marco's head right now?
I'm sure he's lost, and I'm sure he's incredibly disappointed coming into a playoff with really high hopes, coming off of his best season in the NHL. And look, things get magnified in the playoffs. He wasn't very good in game one, but it was one game.
Right.
This doesn't mean that the guy can't play. It doesn't mean that he's not a part of the future of the organization. Doesn't mean that he wouldn't have value in a potential trade. All it means is that in game one, Ryan Hartman made a bigger impact than he did. Mm-hmm. And in the playoffs, you don't wait around to see if it happens again. You make the change.
Yeah.
And so now he's going to have to take advantage. There will be another opportunity for him, whether it's on the power play or a 6-on-5, or somebody else isn't going that night and he's the guy that gets bumped up to try to ignite something. Then you have to take advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, there'll be injury, and I do think I think that you make a really good point about if you sit Buium just even for the one game, and if Marco is the one that gets that opportunity on the number one power play, it's the coaching staff realizing that right now he's in a real tough spot on that fourth line.
And I'll tell you what, that's one of I think John Hines' biggest strengths. I think he really he's a psychologist. Mm-hmm. He knows his players and what. I think he's done an unbelievable job resurrecting Freddie Gaudreau this season, rebuilding his confidence into the type of player that he's been. And the number of conversations I've had with him where it's remarkable how he's got his finger on the pulse of just about every guy, what it takes to get to them, what it takes to get more out of them, what they're dealing with, where they are mentally. And so there is zero doubt that they aren't aware of exactly the fragility that Marco might be feeling right now. And yeah, those are the spots where you can go to the guy and say, look, we're putting you on the fourth line, but you're going to be on the top power play. And even if you only get one, at least in the back of his mind, he knows they haven't given up on me. I'm there. Then we just didn't get any opportunities, so I never saw the ice.
Well, I think he also needs to look at Ryan Hartman as a good example of biding your time, keeping your head up. Sure, Ryan was, I'm sure, since Eriksson came back in the lineup and he was put on that fourth line, was not happy. But he waited, and then the playoffs started, and he immediately showed that he could be an impact again, like we've seen in previous postseasons. And he didn't bitch and moan. He just continued to wait and find a way to make an impact. And I think Marco needs to use that as an example and just say, look, when I get my chance, I've got to do something. And that even means if you're playing with a couple of concrete blocks on your wings. I mean, you've got to figure out a way to make an impact. The one thing you did say that I am thinking a lot about the last couple of days is his long-term future here in Minnesota. We've talked about this for a year here. I just think that when you start to read the tea leaves here with Danilo Yurov coming for next season, assuming that they can sign him, and the fact that we know that they're going to go and try to either make a trade for a center or acquire a center. If right now Marco can't get on that number one power play, which he, when healthy, will not be for the foreseeable future with Buium in the lineup and things like that, and you have Eriksson Ek, and you have Goudreau, and you have Hartman, and you have whatever free agent they bring in, and you have Yurov. I mean, you could see why they're not willing to invest $8 million in this hockey player. I mean, it doesn't work. And so when he turned down what I hear was a 5-year, $25 million deal, I think he might have set the table for a potential trade this offseason.
Yeah, I don't think he's an $8 million player right now either. But
or in the future of where this,
it's curious to me because this is the first I've heard of a legit.
They made a contract 5x5,
and which is the number I've just kind of always thrown out in my head that I've always.
They basically offered him the term of Dylan Strome or the AAV of Dylan Strome and Anton Liddell.
Yeah, and to me,
it was turned down.
As I said, I think on this show many times, that to me is a deal that I would jump at that deal if I was on either side, because you're still set for life with a 5x5 deal. I mean that's what.
Not the way you play craps.
Well, yeah, actually, I came out okay on this trip. But
does Margo know this, by the way?
She knows that I
did well.
Yeah, well, she knows I came out with more than I left. Which she doesn't. I don't know if she believes me when I tell her that. I don't know, but yeah. Well, I'll send
her the video.
Yeah, we had a good. Vinny was out there with me. We had a good run one night. And it's a volatile game, though. It can come and go fast. But I just think I don't think the fact that he's not on a top power play doesn't mean that he's still not worth a 5x5. I mean, great teams have 7 or 8 guys capable of being on a top power play group. And maybe this would finally be the time where the Wild, for what's it been, a decade, where they've had a top power play that plays a minute and a half of every power play because the second group has never been able to do much. Yeah. Well, now if you have a second group that start to pick some of these guys, that has a Rossi, that has a Faber or a Spurgeon, that has a Hartman or a Goudreau, a Johansson, I mean, those type of players. Mm-hmm. I mean, whoever the new center is that comes onto the roster in place of Johansson. I mean, there's some guys there now that you might have a second power play that's actually got some firepower.
Yep. Do you think Buium's in above his head right now?
A little bit. There's been a couple moments where you'd notice, like, okay, he's got some open ice and can skate, but it's hard to tell too because he just hasn't played that much, and that was more difficult on the road. Maybe it's easier for Hines when they're at home. I think the lack of power plays hasn't allowed him to get a feel for his game. The fact that they didn't practice in between the games 1 and 2, didn't practice today because they were flying, just not having those reps where it's even if it's a practice, it's still puck touches with the other elite players. Mm-hmm. And, I don't think it wasn't like he looked like a guy who isn't ready for the NHL, but, you're going up against one of the heavier, deeper teams in the league, a team that is certainly looked at as one of the favorites in the West and in the entire league, and thrown to the wolves a little bit. So I think my guess would be if they do make a change on the blue line, it might just be for one game, and you'd see Buium back in game 4. And I'm just guessing that Buium might be the guy out in game 3. If it's me, I'd put John Merrill back in. You don't want him sitting much longer. If
maybe you go Merrill Chisholm, because we know Chisholm can play the outside. On Buium, the one thing I do love, and it says everything about the character of this team, is how many guys just constantly promote him. Like, I mean, even Faber was talking today at the availability about how, he remembers this when he signed a couple years ago, is that because you're the new kid on the block, everybody's watching your every move. So we're dissecting everything, and every mistake is magnified and all that stuff. And like, I thought, like, if you look at the first goal against last night, yeah, sure, it's a poke check off his stick right to Hannafin, but he actually made a really good play.
On that
it was the wingers that came back that lollygagged back. That
and even the other
goal.
one, it wasn't, even though he looked like the guy that gave up inside position in front of the net, it was interesting listening to Ryan Carter break it down. And, you know, I always am hesitant to make a comment on the air about who got beat to the net or anything, because I don't know what all their rules are for sorting out in their own zone. But Wes and Karts both have a much better idea with me. And in both of them in that point said he got caught because of what somebody else did that clouded his read.
Yeah.
And
you're talking on Bogo?
Yeah. I'm talking Buium on the goal where Hurdle got inside position, but they said it wasn't entirely on him. It was because he reacted to somebody else making a cloudy read. Now I haven't talked to Hines about it.
And to your point, the one in game one where it looked like Bogo let Brett Howden go by him, I talked to Ryan Carter also, and Ryan also said that Bogo looked bad there, but he was covering up for somebody else who screwed up. And,
which is the case so often in coverages. And the hockey's such a fluid sport. It's not like football where you break a huddle and they line up in a formation, and now you can, and even then you might not know what their coverages are, but at least your guys can get it sorted out. In a hockey set where it's so many reads. If the puck goes this way, he's got this, he's got this. If it goes this way, now he's got it. And it's incredibly complicated. And I think, you know, Buium's handled himself fairly well. Things get so magnified in the playoffs, and rightfully so, because your season's riding on every defensive zone coverage. If it was the regular season, we'd have seen him probably play 14, 15 minutes a night. You wouldn't be over-reading some of like this play or that play. But right now, when there's just no margin for error, because
just imagine you're 19 years old and you're now going up against the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, it's
you watch those guys like Mark Stone all of a sudden. I mean, that might be a little different than anybody he's seen in the NCAA.
Well, just even the turnover that he had on the 6-on-5 the other day. You know, that's like we're talking William Karlsson, one of the best defensive forwards in the league for years,
who was reading this rookie like a comic book.
Yeah, exactly.
Big news. The Aquarius Home Services in Connecticut Customer Appreciation and Open House event is happening Friday, May 2nd through Sunday, May 4th. It's not just big savings. It's call your friends, family, and their pets big. Save on heating and cooling systems, water heaters, generators, water treatment systems, and much more. There's food, prizes, and fun for everyone. Join them May 2nd through May 4th in Little Canada at 694 and 35E at Aquarius Home Services. And also go to AquariusHomeservices.com. That's AquariusHomeservices.com. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended. And don't forget to mention that Russo sent you.
There are many reasons to open a smart checking account at Royal Credit Union, including no monthly fees, no minimum balance, and a $250 bonus. Getting your $250 is easy. Open your account by May 31st, receive 2 payroll direct deposits of $200 or more, and you'll get a $250 bonus. See details and open your account today at rcu.org/checking bonus. No minimum balance required to obtain bonus. Offer ends 5/31/25. Insured by NCUA.
Hey, have you been dreaming of a lake cabin lifestyle with boating, fishing, and family fun in northern Minnesota? Well, lately I've thought a lot about how cool it would be to have a getaway like so many Minnesotans. And if you're like me, you probably think that owning your own lakeside getaway is beyond your budget. Well, if you think lake cabin real estate prices keep going up, well, think again. This is Russo, and I'm here to tell you there is an affordable way to enjoy a cabin lifestyle and all that goes with it. And yes, I said affordable. I founded a Clamshell Beach Resort, which is located on the Whitefish chain of 14 lakes for you and your family to enjoy. Here's how. Clamshell has lake homes that offer deeded fractional ownership, and the keywords there are deeded and fractional. You own it. Imagine having 5 weeks a year to enjoy Clamshell with its beaches, pool, and lodge that's full of kids' activities. Is golf your game? There's a great golf course right across the road. Like winter sports? Well, you can go ice fishing, cross-country skiing, or snowmobiling right out the door at Clamshell. And there's no maintenance, no grass mowing, no snow removal. It's done all for you. And you can own a share of Clamshell Beach Resort at an affordable price. To learn more about ownership opportunities at Clamshell Beach Resort, go to cottagesonwhitefish.com or contact Pat Egan at 612-220-9819. That's cottagesonwhitefish.com or Pat Egan at 612-220-9819. 9819.
Question.
Yeah, thanks for taking the question. Hey, it has to do again with Steve Buium, and some of you had said a few shows ago, which is I'm trying to understand the entry-level contract. I guess the clarification for how many games he can play before you lose a year of eligibility in your entry level. Because
the second he signed, he lost a year. So.
Because a rule that I keep reading is that you get 10 games of eligibility for somebody under 19 years old.
Yeah, but he is age. Even though he's 19, he's in his 20-year-old signing age. It's basically under 20. And then there's the CHL rule where essentially you could Riley Height could have. But even with a college kid, it would be the same if he was like So he the second he signed, he lost his year.
Gotcha.
Right, but I'm saying the 10-game rule. Yeah. That's a Canadian junior rule.
Well, no, but it's also, I used to only think that too. It technically is it's for anybody that's under 20, but the Canadian junior rule is the same thing.
But you couldn't play college hockey if you had signed a pro contract.
No, but it would still be if he signed and he was younger than 20 that he would still be allowed to play up to 10 games and not burn a year. So even out of college. So, but the Canadian junior rule
right, but he'd be over 20 if he was out of college.
Well, no, but I mean, if he left after his freshman year, but then he only played 9 games, he wouldn't burn that year. So, in other words, if he had just signed and he was under his 20-year-old signing year, then he would technically not have to play. If he only played 4 or 5 games, they wouldn't have to burn the contract. Yep. Even though he wasn't a Canadian junior. So.
It's essentially for Canadian junior kids.
Yeah, it is. I mean, 100%.
Because that's the no NCAA player could sign a contract and then say, I'm going to go back and play college hockey.
Right. But if the season had ended, like say they Wild signed him, they lost out in 5 games, and technically then his contract would slide. Question.
Hey, how you doing? So with the Ryan Hartman cross-check to the face and the Eriksson Ek slew foot, and probably numerous other plays that are dirty on either end, do you think there's a chance that the Department of Player Safety or the league speaks to the refs in any capacity and says, hey, we got to keep an eye on this just to make sure guys aren't getting hurt?
So not the Department of Player Safety, but maybe Stephen Walcom, who's a different department. He's the head of the officials, but the Department of Player Safety, even though they do jot this stuff and give a report, and Anthony and I have witnessed this a bunch, is they actually sit there not only during a game and look for dirty hits and things like that, but they actually go play by play throughout a game and jot down what they deem as missed calls, non-calls, wrong calls, correct calls. And then that report is given to a slew of people the next day, including Stephen Walcom, and then he can go through it and then talk to his referees. In fact, he was on my plane today. Brad Watson is assigned as the supervisor of officials for this series. Brad meets with both coaches on the morning of every single game, sometimes on off days, and they go over things. So if the Wild felt that there have been transgressions that they haven't been happy about, or the cross checks, they could show that stuff. If there was concern about diving, things like that.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, that's what those guys are explaining. Like they might say, "Hey, look, we think the referees got this one right," and it's more for communication, because during a season, the coaches don't have that path to the referees after a game or before the next game. And it usually just helps to smooth things over. But no, I mean, in this case, they're all judgment calls.
Right.
It wasn't the Department of Player Safety could step in and suspend a player. Yeah. But those weren't suspendable. But
the other thing that is a supervisor's role is, so Brad's a former referee, former well-decorated referee. He will meet with the 2 officials tomorrow. And the way it works in the NHL is you're not getting the same officials every game. So the 2 officials that are working tomorrow's game might have no feel for this game, not watched a single minute. So what he'll also do is tell them some trends. Like, one thing I guarantee, if Brad Watson has his finger on the pulse, which he always does, is he's going to tell the officials tomorrow night, hey, just so you know, at the end of game 2, Nicholas Hague punched Kirill Kaprizov in the face. So now, this actually might work against the Wild if the Wild now go seek retribution for Hague or try to do some indiscretions about they're going to know that, hey, watch the Wild from going after Haig tonight. So that's also the other thing that the supervisor's role is to just sort of give them a recap of what he's seen the first 2 games of the series. Let's talk about Kaprizov and Boldy, Anthony. Boldy, especially, you and I have talked about him so much. A lot of pressure on him coming into this postseason. Your guy Gabriel Landeskog, by the way, is officially in tonight. Boldy
has a lot to do with Matt Boldy.
Yeah, but it just came across my screen, and we know how much you love Landeskog. Boldy, his first 2 postseasons, obviously, and this goes to what we were talking about Marco Rossi before, didn't go well. And, there was a lot of, all right, is he going to learn from it? He's now 24 years old. This is his 3rd postseason experience. And, man, he has picked up from where he left off at the end of the regular season.
Yeah, and we thought coming in to this playoff, we talked about it quite a bit on our Game 1 broadcast, would this be the year that some of the stars from Minnesota carried their regular season production into the playoffs? So I was just looking up the numbers because we had a graphic on it, that coming into this year, Kaprizov, 1.21 points per game in the regular season, 0.6 in the playoffs. Boldy was 0.86 in the regular season, 0.33 in the playoffs. Eriksson Ek, 0.55 in the regular season, 0.38. And then Rossi, who's about a half a point a game player, was playing in his first playoff game. So we were wondering, could those 4 guys push their numbers now to more like what their regular season numbers are? And the answer through 2 games is yes. Boldy and Kaprizov have been terrific, and they have elevated their games. This looks like the same players that we've watched all regular season. And in previous playoffs, that hasn't been the case, where they haven't had a ton of success. And I know the question was always asked, is Boldy willing to go battle with the bigger, stronger defenseman in a playoff series? Well, nobody's bigger and stronger than Vegas's 6 on the back end. And yet Boldy's been inside of them throughout. So I think it's been great to see those 2 guys and the confidence with which they're playing right now. Kaprizov starting to look more and more like Kaprizov, where he's creating space with the puck on his stick in the offensive zone. Maybe still not those explosive turns we used to see, where he'd be the only guy that would accelerate when he turned instead of slow down. We haven't seen a lot of that, but we've seen him start to make plays. That the 2 passes he's made to Boldy in these 2 games, they're right up there with the best passes I've seen a Wild player make maybe ever.
Funny moment last night, but Boldy said that's the best pass that he's ever seen. And then Foligno, who's right to his right, goes, that's rude. Wait a minute, I assisted on your first ever goal, which was, by the way, the winner in his hometown in Boston. And so it was just a funny moment. Foligno, as we mentioned, 23 hits in his first 2 games. That's since the stats been tracked, which was about 20 years ago, is the second most in that 20-year span. Although Gustafsson said today that he was upset because he actually said going into the game that he wanted to get 15 hits and he only got 12. So,
but you know what? They're not meaningless hits either.
No,
they're like, I know Cal Clutterbuck just announced his retirement, and I used to think he was the king of the hit that didn't matter, and where Foligno's hits are creating plays.
Yeah.
And they're putting doubt in guys' minds.
Yeah, look at that play.
The number of times he hit White Cloud last night, and White Cloud's going to be looking over his shoulder for the rest of the series.
100%. I mean, and that's the goal of physicality in a postseason series, is to make Foligno's
comments
catch up to you.
On the off day were perfect. He said, look, you might not feel the effect or see the effect in the second period or the third period that night, but 2-3 games from now, it's going to start to wear these guys down. They know when he's coming.
And you think about the tying goal in New Jersey by Matt Boldy late in regulation 3 or 4 weeks ago, whenever that we were there. That starts with Matt Boldy, with Marcus Foligno going in to hammer Brendan Dillon, and Dillon immediately just, and gives up the puck, and it goes off Foligno's skate right to Boldy in front of the net. And that's the purpose of physicality. And to your point on making plays, like last night, that big momentum turning shift 4.5 minutes into the game, that all starts with, Nyquist headmans it up to the Hartman breakaway. The puck doesn't go in. It comes out of the zone. Foligno absolutely crushes White Cloud. and puck spurts out. And next thing you know, Nyquist takes a hit to make a play, and Hartman goes in for another rush. And next thing you know, it is just wave after wave after wave of wild chances. And so that is the purpose. And that's why that line was so good yesterday. Like, you have to give John Hines credit. I know that there were a lot of Wild fans upset that Rossi was downgraded to the fourth line. Some people, I think, understood that, all right, you're elevating Hartman, but maybe, all right, why can't Rossi go to line 2 and Gaudreau down to line 4? But regardless of where Rossi landed, the Hartman move definitely worked.
Hartman has, I think he's been terrific and maybe the biggest surprise in these two games. And all the non-calls against him in game 1. And, I think there was certainly a little bit of embellishing going on Hartman's part throughout the night, but he could have drawn 4 penalties. He drew 1. The key was that he never once made the mistake of retaliating.
Right.
So gets cross-checked in the face, it goes uncalled, but he doesn't turn around and two-handed whack the guy across the shins either. So he's been perfect. He's been the kind of the Ryan Hartman that we saw a couple of years ago, an agitator, but towing the line of getting under their skin, but not putting himself and the team in a bad spot.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we're going to start talking about some of the other series. What's up? Hey. How are you?
So it seems like goaltending is one area that, the Wild have an advantage. It was kind of interesting. I was watching some of the post-game stuff with a couple of the Vegas players, and they mentioned, we were dominating, and then all of a sudden they get one chance and they score. I just wonder how much pressure that puts on the Vegas side, within the net. Because, the Zuccarello and the Kaprizov goal, the first one, didn't seem like they were the toughest saves to make.
Yeah. Hey, right? I mean, the Wild have 37 shots in 2 games, and they've scored 7 times.
Although the 3 in the first period weren't coming when Vegas was dominating and the Wild got one chance. The Kaprizov goal fits into that category because that's when Vegas had tilted the ice their way. But for the last half of the first period, it was all Wild, and I felt like they could have scored 5, and they got 3. But I think Gus has been better than Hill so far in the series, and I don't think either one of them have looked sharp at the start of games. I think Gus gave up some rebounds early in game 2 where I said, oh boy, it looks like that's not what a confident goalie puts the puck. But then I thought he got better and better as the game went on. I've never been a big Adin Hill fan. I know that he has won a cup. I think that's an area where the Wild have an edge.
Yeah, laterally, he's, I mean, I know he made the great save on Eric Snack, but if Eric Snack elevates, it's in. So I just think that...
You mentioned the shots, and that's interesting, though. So they've played 5 times, and the Wild have yet to get 25 shots in any one of the games. They're averaging less than 20 over a 5 games head-to-head. But in game 1, they had 70 attempts.
Yeah.
And only 20 of them on goal. And so we thought, that wasn't for lack of puck possession. It wasn't for lack of opportunity. They just couldn't seem to hit the net.
Right.
And Vegas blocked a lot of them too. Game 2, 25. That wasn't the case. Game 2, for the last 40 minutes of this game, probably 38 minutes of this game, Minnesota just didn't have anything.
They had 7
going.
shots in the last 42 minutes. You know what's crazy? So they had 32 shots on goal yesterday, Vegas, and 30 shots blocked by the Wild. And Gustafson pointed out today that, when Kaprizov's got 4 blocked shots, that pretty much forces everybody else to get in those shooting lanes as well. So pretty nice compliment there by Gus. Question Steve.
For you, Anthony. How does it work with there being a third broadcast crew at these stadiums? How many booths are there in the stadiums? Does, like tomorrow night, do you guys get kicked out of your home booth, or how all does that work?
How about kicked out of the arena? That'd be fun.
Yeah, it depends. It's an interesting question. It depends on the arena. So when we're on the road, there's oftentimes 4 crews there because there's a U.S. national, a Canadian crew, and then a home and road team. So there wasn't a Canadian crew in Vegas. If this series goes longer, there probably will be. And at home, we still get priority. Excuse me, where we'll get our own booth. The national guys will get what's normally the visiting booth, and the visiting guys would get bumped to an auxiliary booth. At Excel, there's plenty of booths, so that's not a problem. But it is interesting because there are some spots, like in Dallas, for example, we have a spot down, it's on their second level. It's probably the equivalent of like club level at Excel. It's a great spot, but there's 2 broadcast positions there. So during the regular season, we're down there next to the Dallas show. The radio guys are upstairs. And when it gets to playoffs and national TV's in, we get bumped upstairs because national gets that second spot. And same is true in LA. We've got a great spot in LA. So it really just depends on the arena. At home, it won't affect us. And in Vegas, we got moved over 1 booth, but it was essentially the same spot as we normally are. The camera part is interesting because there's some shared cameras, but then each crew has a few of their own because you can share the game camera that's covering the main flow and a few of the replay angles because they're relatively standard. But then the Vegas show is going to, every time there's a whistle, they want a shot of Aiden Hill. They want a shot of Jack Eichel. They want a shot of Mark Stone. Well, our guys want to see John Hines or what they're working on with a Wild player on the bench. So we'll have most of those cases, even with some of the shared cameras, we'll still have 3 or 4 that are our own. So in a 3 or even 4 show situation, there's a ton more cameras in the building.
The Vegas show last night, they normally do their play-by-play from, I think, the Jack Daniels lounge or whatever, one of their lounges, like right on the like the lower bowl, the top of it. And because ESPN took their spot yesterday, they actually
got
were
bumped upstairs
up to the press box.
And it's actually that we've talked about this. I don't know if we talked about it on this show, but there are some buildings where our spots are terrible. Vegas is fine, and Minnesota's fine. There are some that are just brutal. Edmonton's the worst in the league. I don't know what the actual distance is, but we're on level 8. And it feels like we're a quarter mile from the ice. It's so bad that after the first season, their home TV crew moved down 4 levels. So they do the game from level 5. And the NBA has a rule that if you put your own announcers courtside, you have to make the visiting a table available for the visiting guys to be courtside. If you want to send the visitors upstairs so you can sell those courtside seats, you have to send your own guys upstairs. And I wish the NHL had that. Because there are some buildings where if it's really that bad that your own guys can't do it, then why is it okay to send the visitors up there and make them call it from there? So when we go to Edmonton, I always text the Edmonton play-by-play guy and say, just give me a heads up if somebody scores and let me know who it is because I can't see any of these guys from up here. And
plus, you're legally blind anyway.
I am. And it's like Edmonton's jerseys are like those old colorblind tests you did when you were a kid, you know, with the orange and blue flowers and stuff. You can't see those numbers, and the 8s look like 9s and 6s, and it's brutal there. But so there's a couple spots where it would make a big difference if we had to move spots. But the very first playoff game I ever did, so it's my first year calling Wild games, and we played Chicago in the first round. And we go down to Chicago for game 1, and I am so fired up. It's my first ever Stanley Cup playoff game. This is going to be great. And I love Chicago's a great environment, and the sight lines are good there, even though it's a huge arena. But we got bumped out of our booth because national TV came in. So we were in this auxiliary booth. And we walk in. It's about the length of these 2 tables next to each other. Mike Greenlay was my color guy at the time who, let's just say he took up more space than I did and probably most average humans. There's a pool of cable, picture like an extension cord that's 1,000 feet long, coiled up on the table right here. So we walk into the booth, and Mike sets his stuff down, and I'm like, all right, well, I can just pile my stuff on top of these cables, I guess. And then our stat guy comes in, and he's like, well, I need more space than this. And I was like, well, but this is what we got, bud. I mean, and so he sits down. So we're going to do the game, and I didn't have any space on the counter. So all I had was the papers that were in my hand. And then because there were 4 different TV crews doing the game, there was all kinds of audio issues with something happening inside the building. So for the first period and a half, in my ear, check 1 2, check 1 2, checking the press conference mic 1 2, we're checking the press conference mic 1 2 3 4, check 1 2 3 4. For a period and a half, as we were calling the game, Mike and I were both hearing this, And our guys in the truck are like, we can't figure out where it's coming from. We don't hear it in the truck. It's not coming through our audio board. But somehow, as they were wiring so that all these TV crews had access to the press conference after the game, they were pulling cables in and out, and somebody kept punching it into our ears. So my first Stanley Cup playoff game, I didn't have a desk because I had cables piled up to my chin and in my ear the whole time. As I mean, when you're trying to focus and call a game and check 1 2, checking 1 2, check 1 2, and it was when it finally stopped, I was like, all right, well, I thought I was in the big time now doing Stanley Cup playoffs, and this is worse than any public access game I've ever done. So it was a little.
That was the night I covered the game from the press room. I was checking the mics all period.
Yeah,
so
right. It was a good one. That was one of your better practical jokes.
Yep, it was fun. We had about 10 more minutes left in the show, so any more questions coming up? We still got a bunch of merch here, by the way. How about this Colorado-Dallas series? Some of these series have been amazing. Like that Edmonton-LA series. Oh, my God, game 1.
Yeah, that was unbelievable. And I watched early of that game. Then I went to a music show. And when I came back out, it was right when Edmonton was pulling the goalie down, or 5-4 at the time.
If that game went to overtime, like Kemper looked like if any other puck hit him, he was going
go in.
Yep.
Yeah, no, the Toronto-Ottawa series has been great. The Winnipeg-St. Louis series has been great. There have been some entertaining games.
Carolina, New Jersey.
Yeah, the Carolina, Jersey. I didn't watch game 1. I watched a little bit of game 2. That seems to be lacking zip, but that's really the only one.
Yeah, and then a lot of news in the league. Lou Lamoriello let go by the Islanders. Chris Drury, after firing Peter Laviolette, gets a contract extension today.
Yeah, Dan Bielsma out in Seattle, which that hire never made sense to me.
No,
anyway.
well, I don't think I think that was an owner decision. Jim Rutherford points out to there's always a chaos in Vancouver, and it's just always something. And here, he volunteers to already a very emotional, paranoid fan base. Like, by the way, Quinn Hughes wants to play with his brothers one day, so get ready for that.
And then he made the comment that, well, all we can control is Quinn, so I guess we'd have to bring the other 2 here. Or
yeah,
something.
I know.
I mean, it was like, what?
Yeah, and then it was like Patrick Alvin's to the left of him, and he's listening to this, and you almost like can hear him saying, like, please don't say tampering, don't say tampering, don't say tampering, and then all of a sudden he goes, I guess you got to be careful with tampering. Like, he says this publicly. So I don't think the Devils are worried, though. If anybody should be worried, it's the Canucks if Quinn really wants to play with his brothers, because the other 2 aren't leaving.
Have you ever driven past a piece of land and wondered who owns that? Or maybe you need to know exactly where a property line runs? That's where Onyx Hunt comes in, and it's not just for hunters. There are folks using Onyx for their jobs every day throughout the country. From farmers and ranchers mapping out their fields, wildland firefighters navigating rough terrain, to construction workers needing to know who owns what property, this app offers something for everyone. If you need the best land ownership maps, aerial imagery, and property boundaries in your pocket, Onyx Hunt is the tool for the job. Try it for free for 7 days. Download Onyx Hunt in the app or Google Play Store, or visit onyxmaps.com/hunt to get started. If you're looking for a refreshing THC drink, well, check out Giggly. It tastes like your favorite cocktail with no aftertaste and just pure, bold flavor. It's made with real fruit juice and all natural ingredients. It's a Minnesota-made gem. You can find it at liquor stores and Quick Trip locations across Minnesota, or get it shipped nationwide. Plus, with a new low pricing and low-calorie options, it's the perfect guilt-free sip. Try Giggly today.
We love supporting local businesses. We love working with local businesses. I started buying stuff at Twill in the Edina Galleria a long time ago. When I started this podcast network, I was really hoping I'd be able to work with Scott Dayton, the founder and owner of Twill, and I was lucky enough to be able to do so. Now my closet is pretty much all Twill stuff. I don't get free stuff. I don't get discounts. I don't ask for discounts. I go there and pay full freight because I want to support a local business also because the stuff is awesome. Just bought a fresh batch. I'm about to go on a vacation with my wife. Everything I'm packing is Twill stuff because it wears well. It's comfortable. It doesn't wrinkle on planes. It doesn't wrinkle in suitcases. It comes out looking good. It wears like iron, and I'm never going to have to replace it. It's just so simple. Everything from casual shoes to dressy shoes to golf stuff to dress stuff to suits. By the way, you get everything tailor fit, which really helps me out. And everything from gopher stuff to winter stuff to summer stuff. They just have everything. So go to twillandthen.com, sign up for email updates. They won't send you anything unless they have a very specific event they want you to know about. They won't spam you. And go in there and say hello. Tell them we sent you. It's just a pleasant group of knowledgeable people. They are experts at what they do. It's the best men's clothing store in Minnesota. Go check out Twill online and in person in the Edina Galleria.
Question.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what you guys thought, assuming that unfortunately we may deal Rossi this summer, what you guys realistically think we'd be able to get for him if, maybe you're picking a prospect, or if they think you'd go more player for player?
I think it really depends. I mean, because, all right, so there's multiple avenues here. First of all, I don't think it helps he's playing fourth line 8 minutes. That's not going to help his trade value. But so the deal is that if you're trading Rossi, you're probably going to eventually, in some capacity, add somebody that you're going to wind up paying a lot of money anyway. So the question is Rossi in that trade that you're acquiring somebody that you're going to be willing to pay $6, $7, $8 million like a Peterka? Or if you have an interest in somebody like Peterka in another trade, then you trade Rossi for pick a prospect to make sure it's adding no money. So obviously this is a lot of conjecture, but I do think that if they traded him, it is still going to be to, in some capacity, get somebody back that they can replace, his production, his role, his everything. So, the one thing I've been really wondering the last couple of days, just watching this Colorado series, is Brock Nelson. Like, he just does not seem to be the player that he was a couple years ago. He's not playing with the pace. There's not been a lot of production in Colorado. He's been very silent so far in this series. Like, I just think, I don't know, like, you could lose it quick at his age. Gus Nyquist had 75 points last year. This year, he has one even strength goal in the last 72 games. You could lose it quick, and I think they better be careful if that's really what they're going to be thinking.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. Although Nelson, it's a tough spot to jump into a new team, new line mates, new role, all that kind of stuff. I thought he was fine in New York. He wasn't as good as he was last year. You never know what a guy might be dealing with when we're not around him every day, too. So I still think he has some value. I don't know that, clearly it all depends on how long of a term you'd have to give him. I don't know how much it hurts Rossi's trade value. Right now it certainly would look that way, but like we were talking earlier, playoff games tend to get magnified a little, and they're important, don't get me wrong. But when all of a sudden that trade starts to happen, and this playoff series was 2 months ago, I don't know that it really is. People are going to still look and say, look, this guy went from 40 points to 60 points, and all indications are that his work ethic is terrific. That he's really a nose to the grindstone kind of guy. The ceiling hasn't been reached yet. Somebody out there it might affect it for a couple teams. It's not going to affect it.
I don't disagree, and everything you just said is accurate, especially about the type of person he is and his character and all that stuff. But I think that when the team that has him, that knows him the best, shows almost immediately in a playoff series that they don't feel like he can function in the playoff series, that he doesn't play with the pace that they want, that they're essentially trying to insulate him, I think that speaks volumes to teams that don't know a lot about him. That's like, it just felt like right from the start.
There are other guys out there when you look around the league where you're like, holy cow, they got that guy playing on their fourth line. Look at Brett Howden's a perfect example. 23 goals this year.
Yeah.
And Vegas has him on the fourth line. Now, when Barbashev started struggling in game 2, he's on all of a sudden he's on the wing with
I thought that was a weird move though, because I thought Barbashev started that game unbelievably.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden
was good for the first couple
and then all of a
shifts.
sudden, like, he was almost immediately put on the fourth line. So, question.
Coach Cassidy, what did you think about him calling out his players, the big stars, for no points?
Yeah. Well, look, he is a great coach, but he says it like it is. Like, I love listening to his press conferences. I love interviewing him in these press conferences. He's so detailed in everything he tells you, especially when it comes to systems and strategy and all that stuff. But that has long been his MO, and that's why a lot of times players don't love him. When we did the anonymous player poll in The Athletic this year, and one of the questions to 700 players, or the number of people that we talked to, was, name a coach that you wouldn't want to play for. He was in that top. And you heard some of the stuff that came out of Boston, and that stuff was said, because I think that he's so honest that I think it starts to grate on players. That's why.
Well, I mean, that's
why
how
John Hines never will.
Right,
rip
and
somebody
that's how a
publicly.
guy gets fired with the record that Cassidy had. I mean, they had the best record in the NHL during his tenure there, had been to a final, and yet he gets shown the door.
Yeah.
And then won a cup.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, the guy can
He's a heck of
coach,
coach,
there's no
man.
doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. Any more questions? Trying to think any other wild news coming up. Here comes a famous person right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I only recognize him when he wears a cowboy hat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted Yari to come up and ask a question because I know he probably would like to, but just Yari did ask me last night after the first period, we were heading to bed, do you think that their coach let them have it in the locker room?
Yeah.
And
Well, he was letting him have it on the bench throughout the game, too.
Yeah. And I actually said I don't think he probably did too much, but I think Yari thought he did. The second thing
Is Yari your son?
Yeah.
Okay.
Joe
I was trying to figure out who Yari was.
we enjoy.
I remember Yari when he was like a little
Yeah, oh,
kid.
yeah,
I used to
yeah.
bring him to go see Bukestead and Hendricks down at XL Energy Center.
Well, we appreciate you guys because we take a lot of rides back to Brainerd and we listen to you guys, or we listen to the other two guys pretty much on each trip back and forth. So, Johansson, I know he's been playing really well for a while, and this is more a Darren Olson Brainerd question, but the last time we signed him, he was playing really well at the end of the year. His contract was up. I think it's ironic that the same thing's happening again. I'm pretty certain we're not going to re-sign him.
Yeah.
Do you think somebody else will, or do you think this is going to be the end of the road?
No,
for
I
him?
think coaches love him. Like, it is funny what you just said, Dave, because Joe Smith to me at one point in the game yesterday, he was like, "What do you think? 3 times 3 for JoJo?"
Somebody will sign him.
Oh yeah,
And
I think somebody's going to sign John Merrill. Like, John's
For
had a
sure.
good year. Like, these guys are like, there's a reason why John Hines loves them.
So
You're a coach. I mean, do you see
Well,
the value in guys like Johansson?
I thought last night he was as physical as I've ever seen him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was shocked. I was asking myself, is that him making a hit? Because he shies away from it all season long. It's hard for me to see guys that are able to all of a sudden elevate their game to that point when they haven't all year. And it just tells you what a tremendous athlete.
He's a tremendous athlete, but I think his game's been good all year. He just hasn't scored. He's been engaged all year. And some guys know that they can't go blast every guy in the corner all season long and still have any gas in the tank at the end. But he's defended with his skating. And the last 20 games, though, I had a graphic. We didn't use it, so I'll share it with you. That year they brought him in 23. The last 20 games of the year, he had 18 points. So 18 points in 20 games. Shot numbers were high, 42 shots. Last year's last 20 games, he had 3 points. And now this year's last 20, 14 points and 38 shots. He looks like the player that he was a couple of years ago. And I just think he's been this is what a player like him costs. I mean, everybody like, oh, Johansson can't do that. $2 million in the NHL today gets you a guy that's going to score somewhere in the low 30s, maybe in a good year 40 points. I mean, that's what it costs to get guys like that. And he's a responsible player that defends well with his skating. He's competitive as hell. And, he's still a good player. He'll have value for somebody.
And I agree with you that his game is not hitting guys. It just kind of shocked me a little bit. And there are a lot of guys that, Nick Bukestead, that's not his game. He's 6'6", but he's not going to go running around trying to run guys.
No, but he
It's
knew
not his
there were
game.
times where he had to be physical.
Yep,
and
for
then he
sure.
would.
Yep.
Did you used to have to get on Bugie to be a little more physical? Anything else you want to chat about?
No, I mean, I guess
I want
just
to take
as
a nap.
Yeah, it has been quite a day for you, I'm sure. You had to get on a plane.
Oh, don't get me going, man. Because I came here grumpy and I'll leave grumpy and I'll let you have it. Like, I was so upset. Somebody came in here and goes, does Anthony drive an Audi? And I'm like, tell me he was pulled over. And they're like, no, he just pulled in the parking lot in front of me. So at least I knew you were here. But I was like all excited that you might have gotten a speeding ticket.
No, I leave in plenty of time to get here on time.
Yeah.
I had the same day you did today.
You did not. First of all, I left the arena at like 2 a.m. after writing. You had been the craps table for 3.5 hours while I was working. I go back to the hotel. I had to actually go fly commercial, get up at 6 a.m. to get to the airport, fly home, land, drive home, get my car, come back to Signature, interview the coach, speed up here, sit at Starbucks, write an article, and then do this podcast with you, which absolutely is exhausting.
So what both of us had to do today was get up in Vegas, fly home, and come to a podcast.
Yeah, don't even like remotely try to compare what you had to deal with today with me.
Did you have to fly your plane?
I did. It was.
No, we both sat in a plane seat while somebody else flew us home.
And I had to write an article and drive a bunch of 1,000 places. You know, all you did was freaking go to play craps last night while I was working.
Well,
I'm like leaving the arena and I look at my phone and like an hour and a half before you're like, oh, where are you? And I'm like, dude, I'm working. Do you not know my job? Do you think I'm just like out prancing around Vegas, not writing an article?
I know you did your prancing all day while I was working. Do you ready for the game?
Give me a break. All right, that's the way to end the show. We'll have one live show in May. Can't wait. 4 shows in May. How many more months of this pod this year?
I don't know. It's April.
I can't wait till Spain. It's going to be so fun.
It'll be perfect.
All right. Thanks to our incredible sponsors, by the way, and thanks to everybody for coming out to Splitrocks. Again, we'll have one live show in May. Anthony might be there or might not. Depends. Might have to get a co-host guest. Just give me a little, just to get a break from you.
Oh, I didn't know I had anything on my schedule in May.
You don't yet. We will let you know. Thanks to our incredible sponsors, and thanks for joining us remotely at the Aquarius Home Services studio. Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatment systems, and they do everything heating, cooling, plumbing. In fact, I got a text from them today to go do my AC tune-up. Royal Credit Union, Twill in the Edina Galleria, on X Maps, Giggly THC Beverages, and Clamshell Beach Resorts. Talk to you next week, everybody, when Anthony and I do a pod by ourselves, but you're more than welcome to come. All right, see ya.
So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world